Hi, today I'll show you how to change the rear brake discs on a Peugeot 308. Objectively, it's all quite simple, and if you've already done this procedure on another car, you probably won't see anything very new here. So let's get started. Jack up the car and remove the wheel. Next, take something sharp, like a screwdriver, and carefully remove the plastic plugs to access the guide pins. The main thing here is not to damage the rubber boots, so moisture doesn't get in there later. Take a 7mm hex key and unscrew the guide pins so it's easier for us to work. To avoid damaging the threads, use something non-metallic like a wooden dowel to rotate the guide pins while simultaneously pushing them away from the disc. It doesn't take much force. This way, the guide pins won't get in our way later. You could use a screwdriver, but you have to be very careful. Now the caliper should come off easily, but as you can see, it's stuck around a bit to make it clearer. I've already changed the brake pads on the car and consequently had to get in here about 2 years ago. It's still stuck though. It didn't take much physical strength to remove, as you can see. The residue on the pads isn't too bad. By the way, these REMS pads have currently done 3,200 kilometers. Now for the most interesting and probably the most challenging part. We take the T55 star bit and an adapter for a large square drive. I'm worried the small square drive might not hold up, so it's best to use some kind of extension to remove the screws. This is probably the trickiest part of the whole procedure. I'm breaking them loose. They're coming off reluctantly. After breaking them loose, we unscrew them with a ratchet and then remove the bracket. We don't need it right now. We carefully place the caliper on a box or stand. Pay special attention to the brake hose to avoid damaging it. Next, we take a small T30 star bit and unscrew the bolt as we try to remove the brake disc. Usually the rear disc comes off easily, though there can be some complications. The brake hose so as not to damage it. We take a small T30 star bit and unscrew the screw, actually trying to remove the brake disc. As a rule, the rear disc is easy to remove, although there can also be some nuances. The most important thing to remember is never to hit the disc with metal objects like a hammer. In general, you need to be gentle to avoid damaging the hub or the disc itself. You never know, you might not be able to remove the disc and end up driving home with it still on. After removing the disc, clean the hub's mounting surface with a metal brush and degreaser. We use degreaser to remove dust before applying copper grease to the area. For the hub disc, it's more convenient to use copper grease in aerosol form, but since I have the regular kind, it would be a waste not to use it. Apply a thin, even layer, which will give us a chance to remove the brake disc without problems many years down the line. What about the brake disc? I bought a TRV, which seems to be a good option in terms of price and quality, as long as it's not a counterfeit. I've watched many videos online and the discs and engravings look different in each one. So it's hard to say for sure. I can't tell if it's an original or a fake. If anyone knows, please share in the comments, but in fact, there were no stickers or holograms on the box. The oil paper is of good quality with a bright print. There is also paper between the discs, a bag that absorbs moisture, and a large instruction manual in many languages. The disc is painted on the end sides and the marking is applied like this, as if with dots. What do you think? Is it a fake or an original? Share your thoughts in the comments, and yes, the number on the box matches the number on the disc, but somehow I doubt that this is really an indicator of anything. Let's continue. Degrease the working surface of the disc with either a degreaser or a special liquid made for this purpose. Install the disc on the hub and tighten the screw. It wouldn't hurt to lubricate it with copper grease, and I highly recommend at this stage to simply spin the disc and see if it's warped. Some may laugh, saying it's impossible to tell this way, and that there's a special tool for this. I'll even say more, that the manufacturer recommends using this tool in the instructions to determine if the hub is straight before installing the disc. Nevertheless, I'll tell you that this way, you can easily spot a defect, which unfortunately sometimes happens, and bluntly speaking, not ruin your new brake pads while it's not too late. For those curious, here's what the old and new REMS brake pad looks like after more than 2 years of use. Overall, I have no complaints about the REMS pad, except for the price. They're not the cheapest, but everything else is positive. Next, use a metal brush, or like I have, a Dremel tool, even if it's a Chinese one. It's an excellent tool that has come in handy many times. It still works perfectly. We're cleaning the bracket to remove rust. It's turning out pretty well. we're also cleaning our caliper. First, carefully clean off dirt and sand with a brush. Then, take something plastic and thin, a regular zip tie works well, and clean out the dust boot fold. Afterwards, apply a small amount of special brake cylinder lubricant. Make sure it's the specific type for this purpose. Why are we doing all this? Look, if you don't clean this area and just push the piston back in, there's a chance that dirt could get trapped around the seal somewhere. It's gotten stuck, twisted, and jammed up. When you're screwing in the piston, the dust boot can get damaged or even tear. That's why it's crucial to first loosen the boot around the edges. It's also a good idea to put some piston grease under the boot. This gives you a couple of benefits. When you're screwing in the piston, you won't damage the boot because the grease will spread evenly underneath. Plus, you'll be lubricating the piston, making it move more smoothly and last as long as possible. Just don't go smearing any old thing on there. That could spell trouble. After you've applied the grease, wipe off any excess. We don't need it, and it'll just attract dust and dirt, making things worse. Next, grab a special tool for screwing in the piston. Mine's homemade, but you can buy one if you prefer. There are actually several ways to push in the piston, but the key is to do it carefully without damaging the dust boot. If you're curious about how to make this DIY project, check out this video. It has all the info, though I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Moving on, we've degreased the bracket and applied a special anti-squeak lubricant. We don't need a thick layer, about 1 mm is more than enough. You'll need to apply it to all these areas. For application, it's handy to use a stick or even a fork like I'm doing. Next, we applied copper grease and secured the bracket. First with a ratchet, then we pressed it in. On the pre-degreased piston, we also apply anti-squeak lubricant, again not too thick, and we also lubricate what we'll call the caliper fangs on the inside. Everything's ready now. If you accidentally got grease on the brake disc, wipe it off and degrease it. After all these steps, we install the brake pads. They go in very easily. All that's left is to put the caliper back on. We've assembled the structure, tightened the guides, and installed the plugs. No need for excessive force here. Everything's ready to go. Any recommendations for breaking in the discs and bedding the brake pads? The pad instructions are pretty vague, probably to avoid legal issues. However, the brake disc manual has an interesting point, illustrated with a picture. For the first 200 kilometers, avoid hard braking. In simple terms, brake gently for 200 kilometers. It also mentions that discs should be replaced in pairs, both rear or both front. I think most people know this, but it's worth noting that new discs always require new pads, even if the old ones seem fine. As for knowing when to replace rear discs, if you feel vibrations through the body while braking, it's likely the rear discs. Not always, but most often. The second indicator is their thickness. Specifically, for my car with its 1.6-liter, 120 horsepower DV6 FC engine, the minimum thickness of the rear brake disc is 10 mm. A new disc comes at 12 mm thick. I'll give you a hint right away. The disc you see here is still in pretty good shape. It has 11 mm left, but it looks scary because of the scaling on the edges. This creates the illusion that the remaining thickness is almost 8 mm or even less. To measure the disc thickness, you need to remove the wheel. There's one spot where you can reach in with a caliper. Obviously, there's an edge and you'll need washers or some kind of spacers. But I think you can manage it. I think I'll wrap it up here. I'll cover the replacement of the front discs in the next video, as this one is already getting too long. That's all for today. Write all your questions in the comments. Good luck on the roads, everyone. See you later.